Twitch.tv, one of the main hubs for internet culture, with live streamers accumulating hundreds of thousands of daily viewers. Initially, this website was for gaming live streams, but it has branched out to include streamers broadcasting their daily lives and activities, with the chat room interacting with them in real time. One of the recent up-and-coming categories is real money slot machine gambling, with hundreds of channels streaming it every day, and the most popular channels pulling in hundreds of thousands of viewers. Even non-internet celebrities like Drake have delved into the world of gambling streams. If you've heard about this phenomenon, you'll know that there's been a lot of discourse lately about the ethical dilemmas at play here.
Oh, no, you don't get to do that. I have worked with, and also on top of that.
Are streamers encouraging teenagers to adopt unhealthy gambling habits? Even though gambling streams are required to be labeled 18+ and require a Twitch account with an age of over 18 to view, this is easily bypassed. Teenagers can literally just make a brand new Twitch account and set the birthday to 1945 or something, and there's no identification necessary. There's another issue here with transparency. Most of these gambling streams involve sponsorships from platforms like Roobet or Stake.com, fully online casinos that use cryptocurrency. The gambling platforms pay streamers large sums of money, upwards of $1 million a month, to stream slots or card games on their platform.
How much do they pay you as a flat fee every month for fulfilling your contractual obligations to them?
I'll probably get in trouble for releasing it, but I'll tell you $1 million. $1 million a month.
They also often include free or comped account balance refreshes, which is basically free money for the streamer to wager on their platform. If streamers aren't fully upfront about the kinds of sponsorships they're taking, they might be deceiving viewers into thinking that they're losing more money than they actually are. Before I dive into my ethical analysis, I'd like to start out with a discussion on the history of gambling and how we got here. Gambling. Putting something of value on the line for a chance to win a prize. Humans have been gambling for literally thousands of years, with the six-sided dice in Mesopotamia dating back to 3000 BC. But the actual origins of gambling are unknown, like music, farming, or money. It's far more ancient than written history. The impulse we have to gamble existed long before humans ever came along. Loads of different animals, from bees to primates, embrace risk for the chance at getting a reward. A 2005 Duke University study found that macaque monkeys preferred to follow a risky target, which gave them varying amounts of juice, over a safe one, which would always give the same amount of juice. The monkeys even preferred the riskier target, even when it gave them consistently less juice than the safe one, and continued to choose risk in the face of diminishing returns when a single large one was still in memory. They just love gambling. As for humans, we started gambling recreationally when our ancestors first modified stone, wood, and bone to develop tools more than 500,000 years ago. These early gamblers weren't necessarily doing it for recreation, and it was usually related to religious or divination practices. Later on, after the invention of agriculture about 10,000 years ago, we were able to develop cities, commerce, and money, which dramatically expanded what gambling could be. In a 1948 survey of world cultures, the anthropologist Aldred Kroeber found it easier to count the peoples who did not gamble rather than those who did. Most of the games we play now have their roots in the Mediterranean world, particularly Greece and Rome. Like the ancient Egyptians, who believed that gambling had divine origins through the god Thoth, ancient Greek mythology involved a divine gambling match that shaped the cosmos. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades cast lots to divide the universe. Zeus won the heavens, Poseidon the gray sea, and Hades the mists and the darkness of the underworld. The Greeks often gambled on things like cockfights, six-sided dice or kuboi, and contests of skill, like the chariot races, foot races, javelin throwing, wrestling, and boxing. The ancient Romans also gambled incessantly. Gambling wasn't just seen as a pastime for them, but a metaphor for life itself. Julius Caesar, returning from Gaul in 49 BC, faced a monumental decision. Should he cross the Rubicon into Italy with his army and seek to take power in Rome by force? After seeing a supernatural apparition, Caesar decided that the gods were favorable to a bold crossing. As he ordered his men to bear their arms into Italy and begin a civil war, he remarked, "The die is cast." He meant that having made that decision, he must leave the results to fortune, who would decide the outcome as surely as she decided the roll of a dice. This metaphor of using the language of gambling also echoes General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who upon issuing the final orders to storm the beaches of Normandy announced, "We've gone all in." I think it's safe to say that gambling is one of the most ancient and consistent pastimes humans have ever engaged in, with the legal gambling market totaling hundreds of billions of dollars. In 1994, in Liechtenstein, gambling had another interesting development. It went online, with the first online gambling venue opening to the general public. By 1996, there were 15 gambling websites live on the internet, but the next year, that increased to 200. As the saying goes, when you gamble, the house always wins. In game theory terms, gambling is an example of a zero-sum game. It's a non-cooperative game played between the gambler and the house, in which one player's wins equals the other player's losses, which results in a net gain of 0. Gambling systems are designed in such a way that the expected value slightly favors the company that hosts the game. So the more money the player spends on gambling, the higher the probability that the company obtains greater profits. The house always wins. There are some interesting things happening psychologically for a gambler. Take this example of a gambling situation. Let's say you're playing blackjack, a game where you're trying to get the highest total value of cards without exceeding 21. The first card you get is a queen, which makes your score 10. You hit, and your next card is a 5. From there, you're at 15, and you decide to hit again. Your next card is a 7, which brings your total to 22. You bust, and lose your bet. You might think to yourself, I was so close, since your final score was nearly a win, but you were slightly over 21. This is known as a near miss. When gamblers encounter situations like these, they're more likely to continue playing, believing that their performance in the last round has some effect on the next one. It's a fair intuition, because in many areas of life this is usually true. If you're throwing darts and miss the bullseye by a couple centimeters, this gives you useful feedback and encourages you by indicating that success is within reach. But in games of pure chance, like blackjack or slots, this near miss doesn't give you any information about the likelihood of your future success. This is the gambler's fallacy. The incorrect belief that previous outcomes of random chance can change the likelihood of the next random outcome. Now, I can't say that Stake or Roobit do this, but many commercial gambling systems, particularly slot machines, are set up in such a way that those near-miss situations are more likely than what would be expected by random chance alone. This is one of the many ways in which gambling systems hijack our psychology to get us to continue gambling more. There are a number of other psychological attitudes that lead people to continue gambling. When a gambler considers leaving the blackjack table, they might think to themselves that the next hand might be a win, and they would regret missing out on that if they left, so they feel compelled to stay and keep playing. This phenomenon is called cognitive regret. Another common pitfall is the sunk cost fallacy. If you've been sitting at a slot machine for 3 hours and you've already poured $1,000 into it, you might feel more motivated to continue playing because you've already invested so much money and time up until this point, so you might as well have something to show for it. The sunk cost fallacy is the same reason people stay invested in a stock that's steadily gone down, continuing to lose money because they've already mentally committed. It's a bias that a lot of people have dealt with in the last few months, with the stock market having its worst start in 50 years. But say you do walk away from that tanking stock to preserve what savings you have left. Then what? At this rate, the dollars you stuff under your mattress will lose half their buying power by 2030 thanks to inflation. So you have to do something. And with the US economy on the brink of a recession, a groundbreaking Ernst & Young study last year revealed that 8 in 10 ultra-high net worth individuals are shifting to investing in alternatives, things like real estate, gold, and private equity. But B of A's CIO recommends investing in one specific high-performing alternative to rescue your cash: fine art. It's got a near-zero correlation with the floundering stock market, so when a stock dips, your art investments don't have to. That's why investors are moving en masse to Masterworks. Their research team examines thousands of artworks using their proprietary dataset, selects less than 3% for purchase, and then makes them available for investment on their platform. Then, when Masterworks sells a painting you're invested in, you get a nice potential return. As to date, they've sold 5 paintings with an average net return of 26.8% to investors. Masterworks recently passed 500,000 users after being flooded with demand from people looking to diversify and find outsized returns in this inflationary environment. So there is a waitlist, but you can skip it just by clicking the link in the description for priority access. The interesting part about all these irrational beliefs is that they are independent of the gambler's statistical knowledge. So even if they know that the house always wins, they know that superstitions, cognitive regret, and the gambler's fallacy are all wrong, that doesn't stop them from adopting those attitudes while gambling. Problem gambling is considered an addiction. There are loads of similarities you can draw between substance abuse and gambling. Problem gamblers often have persistent urges to gamble, continue gambling despite negative consequences, and even experience withdrawal and tolerance as if it were a drug. So this probably doesn't even need to be said, but gambling addiction can be very bad. The most obvious problem is financial losses, which is clearly related to a lot of the psychological harms. It's been found that 40 to 60% of problem gamblers in treatment samples experience clinical depression, suicide ideation, or anxiety. And problem gamblers are also much more likely to engage in things like substance abuse. Many gamblers also end up having relationship and employment problems as a result of their habit. Some people are also much more likely to become gambling addicts. Men are significantly more vulnerable than women, with a ratio of 60 to 40 in most surveys. Younger people, aged 18 to 30, are also twice as likely to become gamblers than older people. These numbers also parallel Twitch viewer demographics super closely, with men making up 65% of Twitch viewers and 73% of Twitch viewers being younger than 35. The convenience of online gambling is also a major risk, with more problem gamblers living in close proximity to casinos. Online gambling obviously takes this to a whole new level, where people can gamble as much as they want right from their bedrooms. Another important risk factor is whether people in their community accept gambling as a legitimate pastime and the presence of peers who gamble. The parasocial quality of live streaming can also be seen as a new, powerful form of advertisement, taking advantage of this phenomenon. Despite having no physical interaction with streamers, viewers come to consider their favorite streamers as friends. The viewers develop illusions of intimacy, friendship, and identification with the people on their computer screen. If they see their streamer gambling, they are much more likely to see it as something fun to do. Alright, now it's time for ethics. Bear with me for a second here. Here's a famous ethical dilemma, the trolley problem. If you're active in philosophy meme circles on the internet, you're probably familiar with this already. You're standing at a lever in front of 2 train tracks. A runaway trolley is barreling towards 5 people who are tied to one set of tracks. If you pull the lever, this will divert the trolley to a different set of tracks, where only one person is tied down. Do you pull the lever? Let's start by looking at the consequences of this decision. If you don't pull the lever, 5 people will be killed, and 1 person will survive. But if you do pull the lever, those 5 people will be saved, and the 1 other person will be killed. In this case, you probably want to pull the lever, since saving 5 people is better than saving 1. This ethical theory is called consequentialism, or more specifically, utilitarianism. To evaluate whether an action is right or wrong, we just look at the effects it has on the world and other people. The founder of utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham, believed that the consequences we should strive for through our actions should be to maximize pleasure, good, and happiness, while minimizing pain, suffering, and unhappiness. Utilitarianism is usually seen as the paradigmatic form of consequentialism, and it was also further developed by figures like John Stuart Mill and Peter Singer. For a utilitarian, taking gambling sponsorships would probably be seen as wrong. The happiness generated through the financial gain of the streamer and the entertainment value of the viewers is likely outweighed by the potential hardship and suffering endured by viewers who go on to develop addictive or otherwise unhealthy gambling behaviors as a consequence of being promoted gambling websites on stream. Now, Immanuel Kant sees morals very differently. He believed that rather than looking at the consequences of actions, we should instead evaluate actions based on a series of rules. This rule-based approach is known as deontology. Immanuel Kant developed a moral theory called the categorical imperative, which includes a number of doctrines, but I think the most relevant section is the idea that humans should never treat each other merely as a means to an end, but always as ends in themselves. Kant argues that because all rational agents always want to be an end and never just a means, we have a moral obligation to treat them that way. So essentially, we shouldn't just view other people as tools we can use to achieve things. Now, I'll turn to a variation of the trolley problem called the Fat Man variation. Here, you're standing on a bridge over a single track with 5 people tied to it. The trolley is coming towards them and it will soon kill them. In front of you, there is a fat man. If you push him off the bridge and onto the tracks, the train will kill him, but derail, saving the 5 people tied to the tracks. The difference here is that you're actively killing that one person, rather than just letting them die. For the consequentialist, this is basically the exact same problem. One person dies in order for 5 people to live. But the deontologist might avoid pushing the fat man. When you decide to push the fat man in order to save the 5 people, you are using that fat man as a means to an end, and you aren't considering him an end in himself. So even if the 5 people are saved, you shouldn't kill the fat man. Now, for gambling streams, I think Kant would probably say that if the streamer has the right intentions in mind, they're mostly okay. Gambling streams are a situation where the streamer directly profits off of their viewers, which can be seen as using these viewers as a means to an end. But you could also argue that gambling streams are entertaining to many people, which is obvious considering the large viewership. So if the streamer's intentions are, at least partly, to provide entertainment to their viewers and not just to make money from the sponsorships, then they are also treating their viewers as ends in themselves. Keep in mind, the categorical imperative doesn't say that we can never treat people as a means to an end, but that when we do, we must also treat them as ends in themselves. But if the streamer isn't transparent about their sponsorships, Kant would see this as problematic. A separate section of the categorical imperative states that things like lying are a big no-no under any circumstances. So if the streamer is deliberately deceiving their viewers, Kant would see this as wrong. But assuming the streamer is transparent and has the right intentions in mind, gambling streams are not wrong in this view. Okay, so which moral view is the correct one? Consequentialism or deontology? Well, both of them. And also neither of them. I don't think any ethical evaluation is complete without a discussion of meta-ethics. Are ethical theories objectively true or false? Well, some people think that they are. Moral judgments are beliefs. Some of these beliefs are true, and what makes these moral judgments true or false is independent of people's attitudes. So morals are seen as stance independent, meaning that even if the vast majority of people believed that euthanasia is wrong, for example, it's still possible for this judgment to be false. This position of objective morality is known as moral realism. But there are some problems with moral realism. There have been experiments to test how people make moral judgments. Participants are presented with the trolley problem and the fat man variation that I mentioned earlier. When participants encounter the regular trolley problem, cognitive areas of the brain are activated, like the right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the parietal lobe. But when they're shown the fat man variation, there's activation in emotional areas of the brain, like the medial prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. It's also worth noting that people with damage to brain areas associated with emotional processing are more likely to issue utilitarian judgments, even in cases like the fat man variation. This might mean that when we engage in moral reasoning, 2 separate cognitive systems are competing with each other. We have the fast, emotional, intuitive system, which tends towards deontological judgments, and we have the slow system, calculating and weighing up costs and benefits, which tends towards consequentialist judgments. So if morality is just 2 different types of reasoning, consequentialist and deontological, and these 2 systems are often incompatible, then morality is inconsistent, which rules out moral realism. But wait, says the moral realist. Maybe we just haven't found the correct moral system yet. Over time, we will eventually achieve a coherent moral theory. But how do we even judge moral theories in the first place? Our moral intuitions seem to play a pretty significant role. A lot of the time, moral philosophers object to proposed moral principles by pointing out counterintuitive results in a range of cases. We already know that we all have both consequentialist and deontological intuitions, depending on the situation, so it might be impossible to arrive at a correct, all-encompassing moral system that accounts for all our intuitions in any given scenario. It might actually be a problem if we decide to pick consequentialism or deontology as our only moral theory, since each of those forms of reasoning are fundamental to morality, so it would undermine morality itself. Picking one might also just be impossible psychologically, since most people may be unable to avoid thinking in terms of both. So basically, here's the argument. Consequentialism and deontology are fundamental to our moral thinking, incompatible, and both essential. We're often unable to avoid engaging in both types of reasoning. If these somewhat controversial claims are true, then objective morality is incoherent. Okay, back to gambling streams. gambling streams are wrong is not objectively true for me, since I don't believe objective truth is possible for those kinds of claims. It's a moral claim, so it's expressing an attitude or a sentiment, which aren't the kinds of things that can be true or false. But that being said, I do still have a subjective opinion on the subject. I don't think gambling streams are bad in principle. My main issue has to do with the specifics of how they're often done. As I talked about earlier, gambling streams are frequented by a lot of impressionable teens and children who are often parasocially related to the streamer. This makes it different from ordinary gambling advertising, since the psychological persuasion goes beyond just check out this online gambling website. The demographic of people who are at the highest risk of becoming problem gamblers, that is, young adolescent men, are effectively experiencing their cool older brother communicating to them that gambling is fun and profitable. But how about adults who aren't problem gamblers and just want some lowbrow entertainment? Are we not giving viewers enough credit to make their own judgments? Let's look at alcohol as an example here. As we all know, drinking booze in large quantities is usually bad for you. But alcohol advertisements are extremely prevalent, and drinking is often culturally encouraged. Here, we're trusting people to make their own judgments about alcohol. I think we need to strike a balance between the consequentialist tendency to avoid worsening people's experience through the promotion of gambling, along with the deontological tendency to allow people to have the freedom to do what they want and make their own choices. After all, gambling is one of our most fundamental drives as humans, and we've enjoyed gambling consistently throughout all of human civilization. In terms of practical solutions to make gambling streams a bit better, providing regular disclaimers about the dangers of gambling addiction would definitely help. Tightening age restrictions would be ideal, but that's basically impossible to enforce while maintaining privacy. Having to send in a picture of your ID when you make a Twitch account would be kind of ridiculous. Another idea is for streamers to discourage parasocial behavior and maintain boundaries with their audience. The problem with this is that most streamers are incentivized to do the opposite. You get way more donations and subscriptions if you develop a parasocial relationship with your viewers. And for many online creators, their career depends on promoting this vision of them as a friend. So unfortunately, this strategy isn't very realistic for a lot of cases. So that's my take. As always, you can click this button to see more of my stuff, and like and comment for the algorithm. Thanks for watching.